The role and impact of wounded truths. Today we will be discussing the role that heteronormativity has played for children through cultural influences leading to the misrepresentation of queerness. Thus, we see a more focus on woundedness rather than the full spectrum of the LGBTQ identity due to the foundation we instill in our youth. So, to fully understand the depth and impact of these wounded truths, we first need to examine how cultural narratives are constructed, and one key site for exploration is film. Disney plays a large role in controlling fields of social meaning through which children negotiate the world. A common theme in these films is the idea that hetero-romantic love is exceptional or even transformative. And this isn't just present in film. It flows beyond into preschool activities. Children are not born with preconceived notions of gender or sexuality, yet they are involved in gender and sexual socialization in an educational setting. From playing house with strict binary roles to being encouraged to participate in heterosexual activity, children are beginning to make sense of a world through this type of framework, and because of this, they are viewing heterosexuality as the standard or even ideal. And past preschool, heteronormativity also operates in the classroom through school based sex ed, where fears of instability of sexual hierarchies are articulated in the politics of sexual education, and that sexual identities outside of these standards are seen as abnormal. These classes attempt to make heterosexuality the norm and don't acknowledge or support other present identities. Ultimately, these three components, with a plethora of other influences, creates this normalcy of heterosexuality in society. Heterosexual behavior has been an enduring and fundamental feature of the human experience. This normative perpetuates the idea of heteronormativity, which is the assumption that heterosexuality is the only natural or normal sexual orientation, and that all individuals are either heterosexual or should be. And the issue with this is that the transition of people viewing heterosexuality as the norm lays a very poor foundation for the acceptance of homosexuality. And with this foundation, we begin to see the roots being placed for an us versus them mentality, seeing heterosexuality as a standard and queerness as the other. This binary between the two sets the standard for how the media represents queer people, often labeling their experiences as tragic or broken. All of these early influences we see work together to set the default and to stigmatize queerness as something foreign or dangerous. Let's take a look at the plot of these movies. Heterosexual love, happily ever after, the role of fate, and just a funny, beautiful love story. Now let's take a look at these movies. Struggling to come to terms with society, society rejecting you, struggling with your sexual identity, or death. The difference between these two plots is clear, and the main force behind this idea is wounded truths. So, what is a wounded truth? Ultimately, it's sharing, often traumatic experiences and realities faced by a community due to stigma, discrimination, prejudice, or violence. The negative elements of queerness are the ones consistently highlighted in the media. We hear about suicide rates or extreme violence, and overall, it makes the identity appear to be a fight rather than something that one can find peace, pleasure, or happiness in. And then we create this tragic queer archetype, displaying the idea that a person who is queer has a life filled with struggles. This creates an overarching theme that being young and queer is only about woundedness. And this theme isn't contained. It's a powerful cultural script that is present in vast amounts of media. From movies to books, this tragic narrative dominates queer media and its representation is powerful. And this creates a domino effect. The misrepresentation of identity leads to isolation, stereotypes, internalized shame, or even fear of claiming one's identity. Deep fear of embracing one's true self really narrows the way queer people are seen and how they feel they're allowed to exist in society. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can begin to reshape the narrative. One of the most important notes of action is normalizing queerness without centering it around trauma, showing how queerness can simply exist without the need for further explanation or using conflict or coming out as a central storyline. An example of this is the show Schitt's Creek. Through the character David Rose, we see a queer character portrayed in a very refreshing way. David is pansexual and his identity is acknowledged and respected by those around him, but it's not overshadowed by hate or strife. His storyline is not filled with this tragic queer archetype, but is rather shown what queerness can look like when it's centered around joy or peace and how it can exist in everyday life. This type of media needs to be amplified. Next, we need more expansion of discussion. This poses the idea that the type of discourse being held really matters. If it's a negative tone, it's not going to help but rather harm the community. If education can step away from this practice of truth telling and focus more on education rather than appeasing political views, I think it will be extremely helpful in combating the issue. It isn't that discourse needs to stop, but rather it needs to have a different tune. This is essential in educational settings, starting all the way back in preschool. Early childhood education sets the stage for how we view ourselves and others, so we therefore need to build an education system that is about empowering others rather than alienating them. Lastly, we need access to inclusive, affirming, and diverse resources, because this is essential in challenging the narratives surrounding wooden truths. To support this, we need queer friendly resource spaces, especially in schools, community centers, and public libraries, where material can reflect the love, joy, and beauty, even the complexities of queer life. Imagine walking into a library where the LGBTQ section doesn't only include titles of coming out or survival, but also picture books that show queer families living life, young adult novels about queer joy, friendships, or adventures. These resources should not just be available, but they should be highlighted, normalized, and integrated into everyday access. It can remind people that queerness is not something to be pitied or fixed, but something to be lived, fully and freely. Access to these resources can allow for more diversity in sexual education, moving beyond outdated heteronormative framework and embracing a fuller, more inclusive understanding of identity, intimacy, and human connection. Overall, we need to create narratives of joy and resilience to counter stories of marginalization. This is not about ignoring real struggle, but rather refusing to make suffering the sole lens that queer identity is seen through. Queerness is not inherently tragic. It's creative, affirming, powerful, and full of so many beautiful possibilities. We have to serve as a reminder to society that queerness can simply exist without conflict. This is the kind of representation that needs to be amplified.